Hey, in case you hadn't guessed, apart from suffering from severe jet lag and overall fatigue and exhaustion, this has been the first week of a new semester at university, and I have a whole stack of books here that I'm expected to read in a very short span of time, and that I'm very unlikely to read any great percentage of. Putting together a short video now, reflecting on my own experience with long-distance cycling. A lot of people react in a sort of defensive way when you get into the practical nitty-gritty of the meaning of life. I have experience doing long-distance cycling, and I have gone on long-distance bike trips in Thailand and Laos. I've never really talked about that on this YouTube channel before. It's something I have in common with Durian Rider. We don't have much in common. But I do have experience going more than 100 kilometers a day on a bike in that part of Asia. Obviously never as a serious athlete or not as someone even aspiring to be an athlete. And, at the end of my engagement with that sport or hobby, I really felt that it was a waste of time. Although obviously the effects in your physical fitness can be dramatic. So I was going to put together a video reflecting a little bit on the pragmatics of the meaning of life and the art of long-distance cycling in the tropics, my own motivations, how I felt about it before, after, and during. I know this is of special interest to some vegans, and this idea was put in my head because in my most recent video, I did comment on the fact that I made a long-distance cycling trip in the north of Laos on dirt roads connecting some obscure villages. Then afterwards I reflected, boy, I've never talked about that online before, neither in writing nor on YouTube videos, I think. So for some people who know me, that might come as a surprise. I don't know. For some, not so much. And the other side of this is, of all the subjects I've ever received hate mail for online, I probably received the most intense hate mail for two subjects. One being a casual comment that playing video games was a waste of time. Back when I had a blog on veganism, I received really vitriolic responses. How dare you say playing video games is a waste of time? And it was a similar extreme response to comments about smoking marijuana as a waste of time and as something that causes brain damage, which is scientifically proven by MRI scans. That is not an opinion, sadly. The brain damage caused by alcohol and by marijuana use is now something we have mapped out and quantified quite precisely in the medical sciences, although people have very strong motives to ignore this evidence. As with all the evidence that eating meat is bad for you, people go into a similar sort of denial. So, saying something is a waste of time is not the same as saying it's evil. It's not even saying it's bad or the wrong choice for you if you have the time to spare. I had a period of doing long cycling trips. I had a girlfriend whom I'd broken up with, and actually even before the breakup, I went on a really long bike trip. I went from Vientiane, the capital city of Laos, to Chiang Mai by bicycle. And at that time, I knew that she and I were going to break up in the future. So I had that to sort of think about. But actually, the reason for that bike trip was I relied on a Macintosh. At that time, you could not use a Windows computer in the languages I needed. I was using languages like Sinhalese and Burmese, and particularly the literary forms of those languages as they're used to write classical vocabulary from antiquity. So if you want to be able to type Pali in Sinhalese or in Burmese, with the ligatures and orthography associated with that tradition, at that time it was impossible on a Windows computer, and it was just barely possible on a Macintosh. This suffice to say, I relied on this Macintosh I had, and when it stopped working for software reasons, the nearest Mac store I could go to was in Chiang Mai. So I undertook that journey, going west along the Mekong. But I was not a serious athlete, although I did do more than 100 kilometers a day when I went on bike trips. I had no serious aspirations to ever become a competitive cyclist or even a serious hobbyist in that sense. And, when something went wrong, when, for instance, it started raining, I would stop riding my bike and I would take a bus. I mean, torrential rain in the tropics, you can't fight against on a bicycle. So, if you're actually trying to cover the distance in a number of days and then maybe get back to your job or your life, you're not on vacation, then when it starts raining, you're going to take the bus and other such things. One of my main reasons for riding a bike at that time was self-defense. And that may seem paradoxical at first, because riding a bike is not like practicing kung fu or boxing. But I did get a lot of exercise. You get full body exercise riding a bike. And the particular type of bicycle I rode and the way I had it set up, I actually had a lot of weight in my arms. I would have my weight in my arms and my feet, and very little of my weight on the bike seat. It's a preference for a riding style. So really, the triceps and your wrists, and I would have a lot of weight carried in my arms, which, again, I think serious cyclists avoid. They don't want to fatigue their arms. But doing long distance like that, it kept me in shape where I felt I was ready to react if I was in a violent situation suddenly. It wasn't my only exercise. Sometimes I had access to a gym when I was living in Southeast Asia. Sometimes I didn't. When I didn't, I would try to have a couple of free weights around, but mostly I'd rely on long-distance cycling and doing 200 push-ups per day. 200 push-ups per day. And that would keep me in shape where I felt I could handle a situation if someone came at me with a machete. And that did happen eventually. There are violent situations you deal with, and there are violent situations that you prevent simply by being prepared and alert. There's no doubt that I had dramatically less violence in my life simply because I never drank alcohol, never went to nightclubs, never went to the sorts of places where I would be exposed to violence. But even if I was walking through the streets at night, whether the streets of Phnom Penh or Vientiane or Bangkok, the fact that I was alert and sober is a huge difference. Anyway, one of the main reasons for riding a bicycle was just that. Other reasons were the ability to basically explore villages you otherwise wouldn't see in Laos and Thailand. Coming back to the main thread of my argument here. I remember I was breaking up with this girlfriend, and, in the time leading up to the breakup and immediately after the breakup, I would do a lot of thinking about that. I would meditate on the breakup and the associated emotions and what it meant to me and where I was going with my life while riding this bicycle long distances. And you learn to think in a very strange, measured way when you're going fast long distances on a bicycle, because you're shifting your focus, you're shifting your attention between the road beneath you and the road ahead of you and things to either side. You're sort of scanning the environment around you at all times in a particular way, and you can't allow yourself to get lost in thought. So it's a very strange frame of mind you have to maintain while riding a bike. You're never relaxed, but you're also never stressed out. I think that's why some people find the sport so addictive, this sense of alertness that you learn to cultivate while riding a bike. But I remember one day, just as certain as turning a page, I was doing one of these long distance bike rides, and I thought, I have nothing more to think about. I've done so much thinking over so many hours of riding this bicycle long distance. This is it. I'm done thinking. Unless some other major events happen to me that I haven't thought through yet, I have no more reason to do this. This is just a waste of my time. And starting on that day, I did switch up my habits. I started going to the gym more, and I canceled the long-distance bike rides. Now, as I recall, I think my trip to the gym was something like 15 kilometers each way. So I would ride my bike 15K, workout, ride my bike back. That didn't last for that long. That was while I was living in the city of Vientiane. But it was a different story each place I lived in Asia, whether or not I had access to a gym, and whether or not I had a bicycle with me and what I could do with that bicycle. I just saw a video from a fellow vegan on YouTube, and he was lamenting his own sense of addiction to exercise and how it relates to his sense of identity and value and so on. He describes himself as someone who struggled with anorexia and orthorexia. This is not my opinion. It's his own opinion of himself. And he participated in the Thai Fruit Festival and their ritual of going up Doi Suthep. Doi Suthep's the name of a mountain in Thailand. And how for him, at least, it was an unhealthy obsession, or became an unhealthy obsession. I think it is worth questioning whether or not the bicycle and long-distance cycling is becoming an unhealthy obsession for vegans in general. It is just a method of exercise like any other. But obviously, for many people, it symbolizes virility, a second youth. In some ways, it symbolizes the same sort of illusion of independence that a motorcycle symbolized for people a few generations ago. And, you know, the reality of long-distance cycling, in a sense, is none of those things. Any little thing that goes wrong and, you know, your bike trip is over. If you're unlucky, your life is over. I had a number of close calls where the bike could have ended my life or came close to seriously injuring me. I still have broken bones in one of my wrists from a bike accident. And actually, that's part of the story of why I had that Macintosh computer with me and why I was struggling to type those Asian languages using my Mac. Before I broke the bones in my wrist in a bike accident, I had actually decided, after investigating it, there was no point in trying to use a computer as I started this new period of my life working on these different languages, because the software was so obtuse and counterproductive. I said, okay, I'm just going to do all this stuff through handwriting. And during the whole period I did. I mean, I did write those languages by hand, which is a crucial part of language learning and practice, by the way. But I had excellent handwriting in Sinhalese, Burmese, Lao, Thai, Cambodian. It's insane. My ability to speak any of those languages was incredibly limited. But I did cultivate handwriting. And Pali as the Hilfsprache, Pali as the bridging language, you know, those traditions for me. So I did spend a lot of time doing handwriting. But when I broke those bones in my wrist in a bike accident, that then suddenly forced me to depend on typing and then to reevaluate my priorities in language learning, because I didn't know when my wrist healed if I'd really have decent handwriting with my right hand again. I didn't know to what extent I'd recover, to what extent I'd have chronic pain or lost ability to write, even in English, but definitely in second and third languages. I remember I was going down the side of a mountain it was in Thailand, but near the Cambodian border. It's a Phnom. It's not really a mountain, but it's a big hill. Traditionally called a mountain. And, you know, I can remember, as often the case when you're in a real emergency like that, you know, time seems to slow down, your adrenaline kicks in or what have you. I was coming down this mountain very quickly, and I thought to myself, you know what? All of my attention is always focused on the road and managing the minutiae of the bike, you know, make sure everything's fine with the bike. I really need to slow down and pay more attention to the beauty of my surroundings. And I looked around, and the view from the side of this mountain, at that moment, there was an ornamental pond. So the traditional ornamental pond, it's been restored by, you know, Thailand's archaeological committee, but it's part of an ancient Cambodian temple or palace complex. Incredibly beautiful, you know, simple tropical beauty. And I'm looking over at it for just a split second. I thought to myself, wow, that's exactly what I mean. That's what I'm talking about. I shouldn't just be staring at the road. I should be actually taking my surroundings. And when I turned my attention back to the road, there was a huge gap open in front of me, looking like the jaws of death had opened to swallow me whole. Because what the road building crew had done there, instead of using poured concrete, they had used slabs of steel reinforced concrete, right? For whatever reason, the side of that hill it's irregular in highway construction. And the slab of concrete had snapped. So unlike a pothole, you had a sudden break in the concrete, and like teeth sprouting out of this mouth, there were sharp spikes of rusted steel, because it's the same stuff we make buildings out of. It's rebar. It's steel reinforced concrete. Of course, where the steel is exposed by the concrete breaking, the steel gets rusted. So it was a cartoonishly sinister situation. And in the split seconds remaining to me, my ability to do anything was extremely limited. I was on a proper racing bike, not a hybrid, not a touring bike, a racing bike with racing tires. And I did, with all of my strength in my arms, control the bike as I went through that crash. And I stayed on top of it, so I didn't, no part of my skin touched the concrete. That was the miracle of it. But it completely caved in my front tire. So in some ways, I had a very good recovery from that crash. I managed it really well. It's really just using your hands on the steering wheel and keeping yourself upright at any cost. But now I'm in the middle of nowhere, near the Thai-Cambodian border, near this ancient temple. I'm thinking, oh my God, my bike is now completely incapacitated. My ability to repair it, this kind of severe total destruction of my tire, I didn't have the kit with me to repair or replace that. I had some, tools with me and so on. I thought, what am I going to do? And so I went down the rest of the side of this mountain, this small mountain, and there at the bottom, looking up at me, because from the distance they could either hear or see me as this happened, were three guys, local Cambodian guys, Thai citizens, but ethnically Cambodian, who were running a tire repair shop for motorcycles. Now, they didn't usually handle racing bicycles, but obviously they were competent. They knew their way around the bike, so I wasn't reduced to hitchhiking or being ruined. And there were no cars. It was an obscure small road, so it would have been a long time. Would have had to probably walk many kilometers carrying my bike to get back to civilization. But the decline or the incline of that hill, it was very, very steep. That's why that happened to me at all at that moment. Why I was taken aware. And if I had been thrown off that bike and gone down that hill, or if I had gone over the side, it wasn't quite a cliff to the side, but it was an extreme drop leading down to that ornamental lake. That could have really been trouble. These types of stories about injuries, potential and actual, may all seem like fun and games, but I just want to insert a comment that these really were of some instrumental importance in my decision to stop riding a bike. So if you follow my channel, I'm currently divorced. I was formerly married, therefore. I can remember when I was with my wife and with my girlfriend who became my wife, she asked me at several points if I wanted to resume this hobby or this sport, if I was going to start riding a bike long distance again. And I told her no, because I couldn't risk this kind of injury, because she depended on me. Now, the most extreme dependency, of course, is when we actually had a child together. When my wife was pregnant, when we had a newborn baby, I couldn't afford to be sick for one day or to be absent for one day. Every day and every minute mattered. But even when you're not in circumstances that demanding or extreme, right now I'm at university. If I were riding a bike around and I had an injury that took me out of classes for just 2 weeks, that actually really would have a devastating effect on my life, even though right now I live alone. There's nobody else depending on me. I remember she was really struck by that. Obviously, she'd had other boyfriends in the past before me, and she said she'd never been with someone who thought of things that way before. But for me, it would have been irresponsible to start cycling again because my girlfriend depended on me, later because my wife depended on me, later because my daughter depended on me. And to a single man or to a teenager with no responsibilities, what might seem like a relatively trivial injury really is not trivial at all as soon as you have responsibilities in life, as soon as other people depend on you. Probably the one incident where I came closest to actually dying, again, happened in a few split seconds, but it was in the city of Vientiane. Now, this also has a political component to it. Vientiane, when there was a visiting dignitary from Vietnam, the whole city would shut down and everything would change. One-way streets would change direction. Flags would be put up here and there. Intersections would change. They would really reorder traffic in the downtown core of the city so that when the Vietnamese official arrived, whoever it was from the government of Vietnam, maybe an army general, some other representative, would be able to roll down the main street in their car, and all of the school children from the local communist schools would be in uniform, waving Vietnamese flags in unison to welcome the dignitaries. So there would be this formal communist ceremony showing respect and admiration, and normal life for most of the downtown core of the city would shut down. So on my bike, on one such day when the city had been reordered, and none of this is properly signed or explained to anyone, I went down a street, and this is in the same area where the French embassy is and where a number of other government buildings are, where the street is almost like a tunnel because there were high security walls on either side of the street and not really any sidewalk. And I went down this street that, unbeknownst to me, I was unaware it was one way going against me. Just on that day. It wasn't the usual situation. And as I came down this street, a bus came around the corner, accelerating out of the corner, dead at me. So I wasn't on the edge of this bus. I was going right into the middle of the bus, face to face. And the bus not only wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating toward me. And the bus driver looked up from the wheel at me. And even though it was only a split second, there was such an expression in the guy's face because he realized he was about to kill me. I'm not describing it in more detail, but you can use your imagination. But this was a situation where a bus had come around a corner with no visibility, with these high walls on either side, and was accelerating towards me, and I was myself moving ahead at a decent speed on my bike right into the bus. And again, I could see the expression on the bus driver's face. We were that close. And I realized there was no way I would have time to turn my bike or otherwise guide my bike out of the way. And what I did, by the way, I never wore clip shoes. If I was wearing clip shoes, I don't know what I could have done to handle this. I was wearing boots on solid steel pedals, and I hopped up, simply lifting my weight up with the strength of my legs. I hopped off the bike, off the pedals, onto one side, and my assumption was I would just leave the bike to get run over by the bus. But as I did that, as I hopped off the bike then, a half second later, it lifted up off the ground. And that was just because my weight had come off the bike. So suddenly, there's some springiness in the tires and what have you. So, my weight coming up off the bike, then the bike itself lifted up. And without having time to really look, I reached out with my hand behind me and grabbed the frame of the bike. And then as I was tumbling, because I then leapt and, half jump, half fell to get to the side of the road so the bus wouldn't hit me, I carried the bike with me. And then I got to see, as I looked up, as I made my landing and scuttled the side of the road, I got to see the expression of the bus driver's face, and he was totally elated. Because he had been so crestfallen just a half moment before, thinking he was about to kill me, and he was going to have to explain to the police why he'd killed this white tourist in downtown Vientiane. I wasn't a tourist, you understand, but I'm sure for the purposes of the police report, they would write it down as such. To my not only escaping unharmed, but also the bike being carried with me. look, I had my reasons for getting involved with long distance cycling. And I had my reasons for giving up on it when I did also. Ultimately, it is meaningless. And it is a bit of a waste of time. If you're living in Thailand and you don't speak Thai, I think obviously learning the Thai language should be a higher priority for you. Same for Laos and learning Lao, and same for so many other countries. If you're going to move to the Netherlands, you should learn to speak Dutch, etc., etc. Obviously, if you have the time, if you have the money, riding a bicycle is a much more beautiful way to spend your time and money than many of the things that people do. But there's this ancient saying that stuck with me, even though I never really learned Latin or Greek. E quovis ligno. That's literally from any block of wood. The full phrase implied meaning from any block of wood an idol can be carved. Anything, no matter how simple or utilitarian, can become a fetish, can become an obsession, can become an idol in your life. And definitely, the bicycle can go from being a means of transportation to a sport to an obsession to, as this one guy was complaining about going up Doi Suthep in Thailand every day, it can come to dominate your whole reason for going to Thailand. If your reason for going to Thailand is to ride a bike up and down the same mountain every day, that's a pretty meaningless existence, and you need to re-examine your motives. You need to re-examine why you went to Thailand in the first place and what you're doing with your life as an adult. We all do. I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way. We all need to re-examine our motives for things numerous times. I said to someone recently, in talking about video game addiction, the point is not whether or not video games are inherently addictive. Obviously, a bicycle is not inherently addictive and so on. It's not inherently bad in any way. 200 years ago, you'd be surrounded by people, you'd very commonly meet people who ruin their lives with addiction to playing card games with a deck of cards. Nothing addictive about a deck of cards, right? Indeed, most card games become boring to small children very quickly. Most forms of gambling are boring to most people, but some minority of people become obsessive about them and so on. So, e quovis ligno. From any block of wood, an idol can be carved. From anything, no matter how seemingly harmless, an obsession can take hold and take over. And I was witness to an example of that when I was doing my long-distance cycling, which is to say, I wasn't terribly serious, but I would go on runs of more than 100 kilometers in a day. A guy from South Korea who was renting the apartment 2 doors over from me at the time in Vientiane, capital city of Laos. A South Korean guy who was basically a journalist, basically involved in journalism and photography. And I think he was very unhappy with the job at that time already. And he was a smoker. He was serious about smoking cigarettes. He met me, and he saw me riding the bike, and he got inspired. I have no idea why. He got really inspired to be involved with long-distance cycling. And like all of these guys, he didn't buy one bicycle. He bought 3. First he bought one bicycle that was expensive, but then, he got into the biking, and he learned that wasn't expensive. Then he bought another one. The third bike he bought, he's living in a third world country. He's living in Vientiane, Laos, where you can get cheap bikes made in Taiwan. He ordered a custom-made bike from Bianchi, this bicycle manufacturer in Italy. You've got this custom racing bike. He was getting into buying the special jerseys and all this equipment stuff. I didn't know anything like that. And he kept thanking me. He kept saying to me that I had inspired him and that he would have never started riding a bike and never do this. The last time I met that guy, he was ranking in the top 500. He was only number 400 or number 399, but he was ranking in the top 500 of competitive cyclists in Thailand because he started competing in races and ranking and so on. So I saw this guy. I think he was having a classic sort of midlife crisis. He also quit his job, but he didn't quit smoking. So still smoking cigarettes, he managed to get ahead in that sport. Man, as habits go, it's one of the healthiest and it's one of the least destructive. But ultimately, we all got to face up to the fact that riding a bike up and down a mountain is not the meaning of life.